Today, we are breaking down nearly every wide receiver prospect in the NFL draft and every relevant tight end in the NFL draft as well. Today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Welcome in. All three fellas are hanging out with you today. We just Tyler, Plath. Fellas, give me the one player you are most excited to talk about on today's episode.
Brock Bowers, because he's our only tight end we really have to talk about. Keep it short.
Cody Rhodes. I'm kidding.
He completed the story.
He finished the story. Yes. No, probably Brian Thomas, if I'm completely honest.
I like me some Brian Thomas.
I think you both can guess mine. AD Mitchell, baby. AD Mitchell. I am very looking forward to chatting all these prospects on today's episode. But first, let's start at the top of this class with the big three. Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State University. He is widely perceived to be the wide receiver one in this class, both NFL and fantasy-wise. Are we all in consensus on that? Because I have seen people also say Malik Nabers ahead of him as well.
I think that's people just trying to show how much they like Malik Nabers. But I really feel like there's no reason Marvin Harrison shouldn't be number one.
No, I'm also very I've heard people try to do the 1A, 1B argument. I mean, I think it's really just 1, 2. But that's just me.
I think I'm closer to 1A, 1B than I think I am. I just really love Malik Nabers, but we're going to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., all right? Prospect out of Ohio State. Look, we all know he is extremely, extremely talented. He can do it all. Ty, is there any flaws in his game?
No. I mean, his flaws are average compared to consensus wide receivers, right? His run blocking, that's not even fantasy relevant, right? That's average at best. I shouldn't say at best. It's average. And really, I think the big reason why people may like Malik Nabers more than Marvin Harrison is just because they like the fact that Malik Nabers is really an elite run after the catch threat. Marvin Harrison is not the exact same in that way, but I that's not Marvin Harrison's game. He's not going to beat you after the catch. He can if you give him the space, but he's not really going to make people miss. His game is very much being a route technician and just catching any ball that's thrown his way.
He wins multiple ways. He wins at every level of the field. I think you can make the case for Malik Nabers, but Marv is truly, truly a difference maker on the field and just at every level, in every capacity. The only reason why I asked that question off the top, just because when you look at the prospect grades that Lance Zierlein gives out every year in his scouting reports, which I love, by the way, I love scrolling through his scouting reports, his prospect reports. He does have Malik Nabers graded 0.03 points ahead of Marv. I found that fascinating, but again, these are both year one, start them right away, future all-pro prospects that we're talking about here. Let's talk comps, though. If we're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. as an NFL player, who does he most remind us of?
He reminds me of AJ Green. Mm-hmm. It's just the fact that he's a bigger body wide receiver that has no problem getting open, releasing off the line of scrimmage, and really just an overall catch radius too. And I mean, he is everything that you want. And the thing that makes him special, again, is really just the size and overall fluidity at which he plays with.
Yeah. I mean, that was the guy I was going to go with too. Right. And I think when we say AJ Green, a lot of people think of later in his career, AJ Green. AJ Green was a special talent.
He was a dude.
And right. I mean, AJ Green was taken ahead of Julio in the draft, right? So that shows you kind of who he was. But that's been the same with Marv, right? I mean, he's game in, game out, right? I mean, this dude just makes play after play. And he can do it all. So that, yeah, I agree with AJ Green completely.
So let's talk landing spots then. Where are the most ideal landing spots for him fantasy-wise? Because we are going to talk about this from a dynasty perspective. Cameron, where do you think is his most ideal and realistic landing spot? Because obviously we'd love to see Marvin Harrison Jr. on the Buffalo Bills with no Stephon Diggs, on the Kansas City Chiefs But that's just not realistic. So within the realm of possibility, where would be the dream landing spot for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, I told you guys before we started, but anywhere that's not the New York Giants or New England Patriots is realistic. But the place I like the most for him is the Los Angeles Chargers, right? You connect him with Justin Herbert. I don't think you beat that. I also like the Arizona Cardinals. I still think, Kyler Murray's a great wide receiver. You got other talent around him too, so it's not just him on an island there. I like both of them, but I think the Chargers would be my favorite spot from especially a dynasty perspective for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only gripe that you get with that is that Jim Harbaugh obviously doesn't run the most pass favorable offense in the NFL, but Marv walks in there and he is the dude.
Yeah.
Like very clearly the dude. And I as tempting as it is that I really want the Chargers to just take him there at 5 if he's there, I just so question if they're actually going to do that. But
you really think
jump in, Ty.
You really think the Michigan guy is going to take the Ohio State guy?
I know.
I've seen that joke floating around quite a bit.
And the thing is, it runs deep for Harbaugh too. So, I could see him trading out of that and be like, "Ooh, this haul's worth it." Even though we're all like, "We should have taken
this
Marv
haul is
there."
worth it, even though Marv might be
Yeah.
as good as Julio Jones was in the NFL.
But that's the thing. I don't think I think even if he's a Giant or a Patriot, right? That, for me, that's not enough for I'm like, I'm on a Marv, right? I think he's still just such a great talent. It's just the fact that you could hook him up to Justin Herbert or even, Kyler Murray. I don't know why I said Kyler Williams, but Kyler Murray, I just think the ceiling then is just so amazing, if he's hooked up next to those guys.
I couldn't agree more because it is about the quarterback that will be throwing him the football. 2 of those teams have quarterback questions right now. 2 of them don't. And I would much rather be attached to a Kyler Murray or a Justin Herbert. This next guy could potentially be attached to Justin Herbert as well. So let's talk about him. Malik Nabers out of LSU. The more film I watch on him, the more I fall in love with his game, the more I really, like I said right away in the podcast, I am considering him a 1B to Marvin Harrison. Like when you watch him, people kept throwing out the Jamar Chase comp, and I'm like, okay, quit being lazy. That's the obvious one there. I'm starting to like it more and more, though, because this dude is just a dynamite explosive play waiting to happen. Ty, you roll your eyes at me. I'm not calling him the next Jamar Chase. That is setting too high of a bar for him right away. But the explosiveness that Jamar Chase can bring to an offense, that Malik Nabers can bring to an offense, he gets it done. He is a lethal weapon on the field, man.
I think.
Go ahead, tear me down. Do it.
So I get the Jamar Chase appeal. I'll just say it like that. Like my concern though is that Malik Nabers doesn't win as consistently with physicality on the outside as much as Jamar Chase did.
Sure.
And so they can be explosive athletes and stuff, but if you expect Malik Nabers to just go outside and just be the exact same threat as he is when he's in the slot, it's not really the same. And that sounds like it's like, polar opposites. He is still very good on the outside. He is just best utilized when he's in the slot. And I think Jamar Chase is good all across the formation, no matter if you put him in the slot, outside, wherever it is, like he will dominate. So like, again, I get the athletic appeal in some ways of a Jamar Chase comp. I just don't think the physicality is on the same level. So that's why I can never really get there.
So who would you compare him to instead of a Jamar Chase? And Odell Beckham Jr. is the one that I would ultimately go with. But again, Odell wins on the outside. Not that Malik Nabers can't, but again, you see that lack of similarity there. Who would you comp him to instead?
I would rather go with a guy. I guess I have it right here, right in front of me. He's Garrett Wilson with run after the catch ability. Like Garrett Wilson has a little bit to his game, but when it comes to body types and play styles, Garrett Wilson and Malik Nabers can get open lickety split. And then Malik Nabers has this special talent, this special calling card that Garrett Wilson doesn't necessarily have, that you can, he's lightning in a bottle after the catch. So that's where I would rather go again because again the physicality aspects of their game are more similar than Nabers and Jamar Chase.
Which is entirely fair. I can't fault you for that. The highlight reels are just so fun, man. And obviously we watch more than the highlight reels around here, but Malik Nabers is lightning in a bottle. He can make something happen in an instant and is an instant game changer for your offense.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got to land in the right one to be super relevant in fantasy football. Obviously, he is going to be a top 5-6 pick in your rookie drafts this year in Superflex leagues, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Where would be the ultimate spot for him to land, Cameron?
I'm going to be honest, I'm a little worried that he's our giant, right? I just think that it feels so, especially if we get 4 quarterbacks on the top 5, it just feels like he's going to be a giant. I would love to see him on the team that I mentioned, the 2 teams I mentioned before, whichever one Marvin Harrison doesn't fall on. So whether it's Cardinals or Chargers, I think that could happen. We've discussed the possibility of, if Marv goes 4, Nabers sitting right there at 5, right? Chargers have said they might trade out, but I gotta be honest, you got Nabers sitting right there, with Justin Herbert. For me, that'd be, I think that'd be too difficult to trade out, especially knowing you have no wide receivers on that team. Cardinals could always trade back and then trade back up. We saw them do that last year. That's something we've, discussed a little bit too. So I'm hoping that he's on one of those 2 teams, but my worry for him is that he's going to be a giant.
How does that impact him if he's a giant? Let's hypothesize that for a second. If he's a giant, Caleb Williams, the 101, Marv, the 102. We'll assume Jaden Daniels and Drake May are both 2-3. Or go 2-3 in the NFL draft, excuse me. Where would you put Marv then?
Or Malik?
Malik, excuse me, thank you.
So I think I have Jaden Daniels at the 103 no matter where Malik lands. I think that's kind of where I've come to. And I think I'm going to go Nabers at the 104 no matter what. I really do. I just think there's too many unknowns with Drake May, right? I think he has crazy upside, right? I think he could be phenomenal. And I think JJ McCarthy, if he's let's say he's a Viking, obviously great upside as well. But like you said, Nabers is just such a special talent that, landing spot doesn't matter that much, right? I think there's higher ceiling, obviously, with different teams. But, this dude's a stud. And let's say Daniel Jones is awful this year, right? He's most likely gone next year. You bring in a new quarterback. I still have him at the 104, even if he is a giant.
Real quick, when we talked about Drake May last week, we talked about him in a similar style to like a Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, his big year in fantasy football was a quarterback 2 finish. And ever since then, it's really been like outside of the top 10 or like fringe top 10. That's what we're kind of talking about with Drake May a little bit, where so then you're comparing the talents of Malik Nabers and you're looking at Drake May, then I can understand going the talent of Nabers and getting a playmaker like him over a quarterback that isn't necessarily a lock to be a top 5 quarterback year in, year out.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong for thinking the Giants is the worst spot out of the 3, but am I wrong for thinking like the Giants might not be like the nightmare scenario we actually think it is? Like, is there a chance that Daniel Jones is actually like somewhat of a decent quarterback yet? Is that crazy talk? Am I trying to talk myself into like Rome Odunze, or not Rome Odunze, Malik Nabers if he still goes at 6 to the Giants?
The thing is, there's nobody else there, right? There's no competent wide receiver in New York at this point. And Daniel Jones, at his worst, is going to have to throw for 3,000 yards and, 15 passing touchdowns. And they're going to have to go somewhere. So I'm not saying that, he's going to break, Nakua's record that was just set. But, even if Daniel Jones has a down year, if he's a giant, he's going to get targets, he's going to get receptions, and he's going to get yards, especially with how talented he is.
There's no way Brian Daboll doesn't manufacture as many touches as humanly possible for him when his grouping is Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and Darius Slayton.
No, 100%. And if he doesn't, he will not be an NFL coach next year. So you don't have to worry about it, right? That's kind of how it's going to work.
Right. So either way, Malik Nabers will be force-fed, whether he lands in Arizona and the Chargers with the Giants, whoever it may be. But it seems like a for sure thing that Malik Nabers, Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to be top 6 picks in the NFL draft this year. Now, this next player, I'm not sure, so I'm really curious to hear where we think he ends up. Rome Odunze University of Washington, just shy of winning the national championship this year. Rome is the final consensus big three, and he is very clearly three. I don't think there's anything he can do at this point to leap either Nabers or Marvin Harrison Jr. by his own power. There's a lot of mixed things on Rome Odunze. I think some people want to give him a hard time because the competition wasn't that great this year, and he's not the greatest separator in the world. Doesn't appear to have the best yards after catch in the world either, depending on how you want to look at his film. But Ty, give us your 2 cents on what you've seen in Rome Odunze's film.
I just see a highly productive player that is very successful in his routes, has a developed route tree just based on his experience. He's savvy at the catch point. He's got body control, so he's going to be a big red zone threat no matter where he goes in the NFL. I really don't see a weakness in his game for a guy that is, I believe he came in at like 6'2", 210, something like that, 6'3", 210 in at the combine. Like, he's got short area quickness. That's really the biggest question for these bigger wide receivers is, do you still maintain quickness in short areas? And he does. Like, he finished really, really well, tested really well. The dude is just, he is your all around well-rounded prospect that is, there's no way, honestly, like if I had to like give you a player that I would be shocked if they don't succeed in the NFL, it's Rome Odunze, because he just offers everything that you want in a modern NFL wide receiver.
If you follow Matt Harmon's reception perception at all, that thing is a green bean, baby. That thing is all green. He won all over the field this year. The route percentage, I mean, he, like you said, he's all over the field. He ran everything. Mm-hmm. I do think Rome is going to be one of those prospects that he's not the sexiest player in the world. He, again, people are going to want to knock him for the level of competition that he faced. The dude is going to be a winner at the next level. He will be just fine. So in terms of fantasy, Cam, where do we want to see him end up?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. It's, you look at him and he's kind of like got that, you hear all these player comps coming out. And it's Devontae Adams, it's Larry Fitzgerald, it's Amari Cooper from all these. And it's what that comes down to is, like Ty said, it's not going to be flashy, but these are like extremely technical, highest end wide receivers, right? And that's kind of guy you're putting him with. Right now, the most common mock for him is the Bears. And you don't love it this year, right? I don't think it's a Seattle JSN situation where you're like, man, is this guy even involved at all, right? I think Rome's that, is another step up. And at the same time, Keenan Allen is 32. So if he went to the Bears, I don't think it's a bad thing, right? You're connected to Caleb Williams after this year. You're most likely at least the wide receiver 2, with a chance to move up to that wide receiver 1 spot over DJ Moore. I love DJ Moore, I'll admit it, but I think that Rome is good enough that it's going to be a 1A, 1B pretty quick there. And then the thing Lucas, you really are pulling for this, and I love it, but it's the Bills, a team like the Bills going, you know what, we're going to throw it all in. We're going to move up and we're going to take, that's what you're hoping for, right? If you're looking at, taking Rome in a rookie draft, you were hoping that, hey, the Bills go, or maybe even the Chiefs or, Dallas, like one of those teams that's like super prolific offense. Maybe they have wide receiver 1, but they, you're just really looking for them to go, take that. So I think the Bills would probably be the dream landing spot, but I think Chicago is a realistic one that I still really like.
Can I throw out one real quick?
I would love it.
I love the Jets.
I don't mind that.
Wilson.
I don't mind that at all either. I really don't.
And I think training up to 7 with Tennessee makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It's not too far of a fallback for Tennessee then. You don't need to spend a whole ton of capital to go up to 7 then. And then just pairing him up with Garrett Wilson, man, that is stuff of nightmares for defenses.
My worry is this Jets organization has been historically bad at finding quarterbacks, and Aaron Rodgers maybe has 2 years left. And so you're sitting there after 2 years and you don't, that's my only worry with the Jets is he gets on that team. We're like, oh my gosh, going to the second year, this guy's amazing and he's got no quarterback. And you're just like, oh, this sucks again.
I want the Bills to grandfather the Atlanta Falcons and offer for Rome Odunze so bad. And like, I think I've come to the conclusion that Atlanta is probably the best team for that. They do have holes on the defensive side of the ball that they can fill, but look, they're going to win by offense. That's kind of what they've committed to over the last few years in the draft, is getting a Drake London, getting a Kyle Pitts, getting a Bijan Robinson. We're going all in on Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
This can kind of be their insurance in future years if the Bills go ahead and offer them 28, their 2025 first, the 2025 second they just got from Houston via Minnesota, throw in 2 fourth-round picks as well. I mean, they could Julio Jones an offer for Rome Odunze and jump all the way up from 28 to 8.
Yeah.
And if I'm the Bills, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Because you cannot waste another year of Josh Allen's prime. When you are 1 win away from the Super Bowl, multiple years, and you trade away your stud wide receiver, and all you're left with is Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. No disrespect to Dalton Kincaid, but that dude's only in his second year in the league. You got to go out and get somebody for Josh Allen to throw the freaking football to.
Yeah.
So go ahead, give that grandfather offer to the Atlanta Falcons. Go ahead and get Josh Allen, debatably the most well-rounded wide receiver we have in this draft outside of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. I will say I do wonder a little bit, looking at Tennessee's moves, Atlanta's moves this offseason, if they are eyeing up, Rome Odunze here, going, from a fantasy perspective, I don't love it for either team.
No.
But from an NFL's perspective, right, I mean, like, you look at the Falcons, that offense that it would build would be absolutely nuts. I mean, that'd be a crazy looking offense. Tennessee, you go, they're just trying to throw everything at Will Levis to give him as much to succeed. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I do wonder just how much, these teams are entertaining that if Rome is there.
Rome is going to be the most fascinating one of the draft, because I think he's the one that could go earlier than people expect. I think he could go as early as 6 to the Giants.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yep.
But he's also the one that I think could slide outside of the top 12 potentially as well. If teams are going to prioritize a different need instead. Yeah. So he'll be a fascinating one to watch on draft night. We've cleared the big 3, fellas. Why don't we take a quick break, and we'll be back with the rest of the pass catching prospects in this draft. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back, and we are going to dive into the rest of the wide receiver prospects and one tight end prospect in this draft. I will say up front, there's going to be a lot of wide receiver names we don't cover here, but there's a lot we've got to plow through here in a short amount of time. So, fellas, let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into our consensus wide receiver 4 in this draft. It is Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. And again, I think he's just kind of floating here at 4 by himself. I think you can make a case for our wide receiver 5 as well. Me personally, I would, to at least put him in the same tier. But at this point, Brian Thomas Jr. is pretty clearly the wide receiver 4 in this class. What's there to love about his game time?
He really just has the makings of a dominant outside wide receiver, for years to come. He's got great speed and agility for a size that he has, that I'm going to try to pull up here, because if I'm not mistaken, it's pretty impressive. 6'3", 210. So almost the exact same size as Rome Odunze, but he ran a 4.3 340 with a 38.5-inch vertical. Yeah, like, the dude is quick. He's got size, and he may not be as developed or polished as what any of the top 3 guys that we just talked about, but I mean, he wins a fair amount against DBs and stuff. And according to Reception Perception, 57th percentile success versus man and 59th percentile success versus zone just tells me, like, this dude is just raw. Like, he's just going to need some experience and some reps, but he's 83rd percentile against press. So the dude can get off the line. He can beat dudes in a flash down the field. And then, he really can really kind of dictate how the game goes then, because if the DBs are so worried about him over the top that they're going to just go all out to stop him and try to, keep pace with him, hit the brakes and then just sit, right? So I think there's a lot of intrigue to his game. But I don't buy into the hype of him being a well-rounded prospect or really, I should say like this, an immediate contributor in his rookie year. I think it's going to take a couple games. Maybe it's going to take half a season, but again, he has the makings of being a legit outside threat because of speed, agility, size, and his length and reach is really going to help him bring in some jump balls. So then there's some red zone upside for fantasy, and I think that's pretty exciting too.
Yeah.
I think the thing that concerns me most about Brian Thomas Jr. is, despite having 17.3 yards per reception this last year, he only ran 1.97 yards per route against zone coverage, only 1.74 against man, and only 1.95 for his career in college. Like, I would love to see that for a guy who's going to be the wide receiver 4 in this class, to be definitely above 2, but that placed him 26th out of 35 qualifying receivers in this class. That concerns me. But Cameron, in terms of fantasy success, because I agree, he has the potential to be a winner down the field. He can blow by people, and he can be a downfield threat. He has the size and the speed to do so. Where does he need to land, though, for that to be a reality?
Yeah, I really like Cincinnati, assuming they move off of T. Higgins. Even if they keep T. Higgins this year, right? I mean, a year behind, where you're the wide receiver 3 behind T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, for a guy who's raw, it doesn't get much better of guys to watch, especially, because he would take that T. Higgins role, right, of that down the field, playing the bigger wide receiver. So I would, and then obviously you're connected to Joe Burrow, which, that doesn't hurt at all.
No.
Indianapolis, I think, would be another fun one. Him and Anthony Richardson, along with Michael Pittman. Right. Pittman's a bigger wide receiver, but he does not play down the field, right? I mean, his career yards per reception is like 11. And then I think Dallas would be fun as well. Just to get him out there with CD, get some real speed on that field together. I think all 3 would be fun, but like you said, it's, for him, he's got to develop. So if he's able to go to these places and develop, man, he's going to be fun to watch. But, we see this a lot of times with these wide receivers, in the first round of, hey, we're taking a project here and it doesn't pan out. So, that's going to be the big caveat, depending on where, no matter where he goes.
And I'll say this real quick too, Lucas, just back to your yards per route run call out. The dude had one of the most limited route trees that I've seen in a prospect. I mean, you again call back to reception perception. His route percentages, 20% of his routes were slants, almost 30% of his routes were curl routes, and 18% were his go routes. Everything else was just really like few and far between the amount of times that you would see it in a game or games in the plural. So that's where I just see like the dude is probably going to have a bigger development plan than seeing immediate success, but I think he's an investment that can pay off in the long term.
For sure. To be fair, he did play alongside Malik Nabers, who had like 89 receptions and 1,500 yards, so, but, the fact that he's only running 3 routes is definitely a little bit concerning for a first round wide receiver.
So that's also where my concern comes into play a little bit. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that because he played alongside Malik Nabers, and if he doesn't become the wide receiver 1 in an offense, he's stuck in this. I'm not gonna tell you that. That's lazy analysis. But it does give me a vibe check on the Jacksonville Jaguars as a landing spot, because I'm not going to be surprised at 17 if they're sitting there and say, you know what, we let Calvin Ridley walk. We got Christian Kirk here, Evan Ingram. They're both underneath guys, though. We need someone who can stretch the field for us. And I wonder if they're sitting there looking at Brian Thomas and thinking, we've already got guys who can win underneath. Why don't we go ahead and get somebody who can win over the top? Because that's where we've seen Brian Thomas Jr. thrive. Yeah. Give me a vibe check on that.
It gets crowded because they got Gabe Davis and they still have Zay Jones, correct?
They do.
Yep.
So that would be the only worries, that it's just a little bit crowded. But for me, that landing spot depends as much on him as on Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson, right? Because we've seen it from them for one season, then this last season was just not great. So that's my worry, is you're depending on multiple pieces working together, whereas you go to like one of these more established teams and you're just like, okay, if he can figure it out, we're good. So that is my concern. I don't hate it though, because I do believe in Trevor Lawrence. I think he's going to bounce back this year. But
I know that you had just talked about Buffalo trading up for a guy like Rome Odunze.
I didn't hate
I
it for
think
Buffalo either.
I think it's a little more realistic that you would see Buffalo trade up to 15 or 16 to get Brian Thomas Jr., just because it's probably not as expensive and you're getting the field stretcher that you need, because you've got underneath guys like Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir that can take care of that. So I'm not going to say that Jacksonville is like impossible, but I think that it's not towards the top of those ideal landing spots.
And Gabe Davis is just a fascinating one, because then the question is, can Brian Thomas Jr. beat out Gabe Davis?
yeah,
I'm not too worried about.
Should.
that's true.
He
That's true.
should.
If he's a first round wide
should.
receiver, that shouldn't be an issue.
He should.
Right. Which that could, because you're right. Gabe Davis is 100% the definition of a field stretcher, but I wonder if they can look at Brian Thomas Jr. and say, you know what, we first rounder instead of Gabe Davis, who has a lot to prove. He kind of disappears. He does disappear. Who am I kidding?
Mhm.
I wonder if that's intriguing for them at all. But I do agree. I think Cincinnati would, if they move off of T. Higgins, would be an ideal landing spot. Let's move on to our wide receiver 5 in this class. And boy, I am excited to get into this prospect. My man, A.D. Mitchell out of Texas. Previously at Georgia, transferred to the Texas Longhorns, actually to be closer to his son, fun fact. Only 55 receptions for 845 receiving yards this last year, but the number you love to see, 11 touchdowns, 4,340, 39.5-inch vertical. I'm going to say it now. If this dude figures it out, we could be looking at a top 3 wide receiver from this class. If he puts it all together, if he lands in the perfect spot in the NFL, the sky is truly the limit for him. Like, Pro Bowler is in the cards for A.D. Mitchell, but he's got to show it. He's got to show it, because I think we all know, if you've been following anything on A.D. Mitchell, his tape at Texas is just fascinating is not the right word.
It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody. That is the perfect way to put it. Because there were times where you're like, are you going 60% right now?
Mm-hmm.
And he admitted, yeah. But it was because he was saving himself, throwing the defenders off pace a little bit. That's a whole thing in and of itself. Ty, I remember you asked me about A.D. Mitchell early on, and I was like, I don't know. I went through and watched his tape, and I fell in love with how good this guy could be in the NFL. So why are people falling in love with his tape first? Let's talk about that. Why are people head over heels for him?
He is the modern day X wide receiver, in the sense that you can line him up outside. He's going to beat man. He's going to be press coverage. He is going to just separate with ease. And he keeps DBs guessing. That's the most exciting thing, is that like he is really just kind of like a bag of tricks, and you can never guess what he's going to do. Either he's going to, it's the nuances, I'll say, in his route running ability for a guy his size and catch radius. I mean, there were some downfield throws that Quinn Ewers is either way short on or way outside of, and A.D. Mitchell does the unbelievable and hauls it in, right? So, like, you can't help but notice, again, the slow play sometimes off the line of scrimmage, and you're like, okay, are you doing that because it's a coaching thing? Are you doing that because it's a personal thing? It rarely happened when a guy was jamming him at the offensive line. I will say that. That is some kind of, grace that I will be willing to give him, because it happened a lot when there were guys off the line of scrimmage from him that he's taking his time getting into his routes and stuff. But the thing is, like, I don't really care, because he's keeping the DBs guessing, right? And all that's going to do is just set up, his stop and goes and all those kind of things to be a downfield threat. So again, like I said, AD Mitchell's film, it's not really going to be for everybody, but if you remove that one piece out and you look at the rest of the body of the work, you're like, that's really, really good. That's really exciting for a prospect. And so you just got to, look, you're if you take him in the draft, you're taking the good, but you've got to have a plan that gets him out of that play style a little bit, because that won't last long.
You got to think that's coaching to some extent, just because of like in the NFL, there's so many guys that do that as well, but it's not like 60% to 100%, right? It's like 85 to 100. And so you don't notice it like when you're just watching, unless you're looking for it. And so you got to, and if you're running 60% of your routes, you're not going to play in the NFL very long either, right? So I mean, I think that's something too that's going to be fixed quickly. And it is his play style, like you said. I mean, he's keeping the DB guessing. It's just got to be refined a little bit at this point.
You look at his tape at Georgia too, not as prevalent there. You go back and watch that. You saw this more at Texas. You didn't see it as much at Georgia, which makes me think coaching, I don't know exactly what it was, but it wasn't an issue when he originally started at Georgia. So that's why people are kind of turned off by his tape, because it's okay. Really, is he really gonna care in the NFL? Is he really gonna give a crap? Which I think if he lands in the right situation, he absolutely will. And his body control is just nuts, man. The way, again, you brought up the routes, Ty. There'll be times where he'll pull off a double move in a route and he didn't even try to. It was just the way he's gliding around the field effortlessly. And again, he keeps the DBs guessing. Quinn Ewers, man. I really can't wait to see AD Mitchell with a good quarterback in the NFL, because the way he would have to leap and contort and twist his body to go make these over the shoulder catch, it's infatuating. I love AD Mitchell because I think if he's going to be an end of the first round prospect, that only means he's going to land in favorable scenarios, which to me, boy, you're setting him up for success in the NFL. So Cameron, give me some of those teams that we could see him land on.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the end of the first round. That's usually pretty good landing spots no matter who you are. But I mean, the Buffalo's right there. Kansas City's right there. Both could use a wide receiver like AD Mitchell, a guy who can stretch the field a little bit. I think those are my dream landing spots from fantasy. I think Miami, I think they're going to be tempted. They're just a team that is just like, oh, speed guy. Tyreek Hill's 30. Oh, maybe we, dip into that a little. I could see them. Baltimore from an NFL perspective, I like, just because I think they do need someone to stretch the field, because Rashad Bateman's just not that guy. He just isn't. And, I think
you're not that guy, pal.
I think AD Mitchell could be. I don't love that nearly as much for fantasy, but yeah, if he could be a Buffalo Bill or Kansas City Chief, you'd be pretty happy if you could get AD Mitchell.
Can we get comps too? I think we all in agreement that George Pickens might be the most accurate comp there is in terms of play style, explosiveness, but then also kind of the like questionable character at times. No, nothing against George Pickens. I mean, great guy, I'm sure, great guy, but I think that's where majority of people have kind of landed on is kind of the George Pickens kind of player.
For sure.
Well, I think for me, that's where I really. That's how I ultimately really came to the conclusion that the slow get-offs from the line of scrimmage are more so play style than it is an attitude or an effort thing. Because you go back and watch George Pickens' film when he was in Georgia and his first couple seasons in the league, that is an attitude thing. That is very much, he does not care. Watch that, and then you watch AD Mitchell, and you're like, okay, I get AD Mitchell's. It's the same speed, but you can see that there's a purpose behind it. It's not just a guy like George Pickens that's being a little more defiant.
And I think AD Mitchell has a higher ceiling than George Pickens does.
Amen, brother. Heck yeah, he does.
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
He's on the Steelers, so that helps a lot.
that is also very, very fair. Doesn't have Dangerous throwing him the football.
Yeah.
Well, not yet. At least we'll see. I don't think the Steelers would take him. But let's move on. Ty, these are two of your favorite prospects here coming up. I'm looking forward to talking about them. Let's dive into our wide receiver 6. Lad McConkey. I need an Irish man, Laddie, drop in here somewhere, because that's going to be the new thing I'm going to create for him on our show. Is whenever we talk about Lad McConkey, we're going to talk about him in an Irish accent. Laddie, this might be the best route runner in this class.
Yes, he is.
Ty, you agree with that? I threw that out there. I was hoping someone would bite on that.
He is.
I think you can make a case for a lot of the top 5 guys here. I think a Lad is so refined, man. It is a work of art to watch him run routes. That's the one big plus in his game. How's that all going to translate to the NFL, though? Talk to me about that.
So with his route running, he creates separation with ease. Like, it is, again, it's a work of art. It's a dance, honestly. Like, It's just beautiful. I think the best way to explain what Lad could be in the league is a quarterback's best friend and a DB's worst nightmare. Like, because a quarterback can rely on him with really good hands, with a guy that is going to be open almost, I'm not going to say all the time, but like a guy that is going to be that's going to be open more times than not. And DBs are just going to have a tough time trying to corral him and try to keep him contained. I think the thing that doesn't make him like a consensus, like top 10, top 15 guy, because when you hear that, you're like, well, why shouldn't he go higher in the draft? It's really just his size. Like, he is 5'11", 185. Like, so it's not, and you look at him in pads too. Like, you look at his film, he is pretty slender too. Yeah. So you're not going to throw him over the middle all the time, but here's it. Like, if the Texans can find a way to utilize a 165-pound Tank Dell, teams will most definitely find a way to utilize a 185-pound Lad McConkey. So I think Lad is really just a high floor player in, I mean, both NFL and fantasy, just because, again, he's great in running routes. He can separate with ease. He does not really get stuck on the offensive line a whole lot. And he has the ability to make something happen when the ball is in his hands too.
The thing I'm worried about for Lad McConkey is that he might just end up being the league's best wide receiver too, which is not a bad thing to be, but I don't think his ceiling is to be a wide receiver one for an offense.
No, I don't
think he has that in his range of outcomes, especially when you look at the production profile at Georgia, you look at the utilization rates, it's just not there. What people absolutely love is how he plays football, which frankly probably should be the most important thing you're scouting when you're an NFL team. So, Cambro, who are some of the teams that should be looking at Lad McConkey and will potentially be drafting him in the NFL draft?
Yeah, I mean, the first team I think is the Chiefs. That comes a lot from me doing that Lancer line mock review. That's where he had him going. I don't hate that. I think the Chiefs might be moving towards the path of, hey, we're going to take good route runners that are going to get open for Mahomes and then just take, our dart throws with these deep guys, right? Instead of trying to hit on the deep guys. So I don't hate that. The Chargers, I think, are another one. In the beginning of the second round, maybe trading up potentially. But, even if you take a Marvin Harrison, right? I mean, Justin Herbert needs weapons. If you don't, like Ty said, a guy that's going to get open. Justin Herbert's going to find you. And the last one that I sneaky really like is the Atlanta Falcons. I think you put him on that offense, and thinking from a rookie draft perspective, he goes to Atlanta, everyone's going to be like, oh, that offense is too crowded. But we're not looking for...
Bro, as much as I love Rondale, we all know Rondale's like a wide receiver 4 there right now.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, like you just said, Lucas, we're not expecting him to be the wide receiver 1 on an offense. So this puts you in a role where you got Kyle Pitts and Drake London, playing more on the perimeter. And I mean, that's going to open up so much underneath for Lad McConkey. And I know Bijan's a great receiver as well, but obviously it's a little different being a wide receiver. So I sneaky like the Falcons, but obviously Chiefs and Chargers would be pretty nice too.
You kind of gave a little bit of a cringe there, Ty, in terms of the Falcons. They do have Darnell Mooney as well, but he is much more of the field stretcher. But you gave a little bit of a cringe.
I just don't think he's going to be there. And I get we're talking fits and stuff like that.
Yep.
And maybe in Atlanta, he could become a wide receiver 2 for a team, but I think with the money that they spent on Darnell Mooney, I think then he's kind of stuck in that wide receiver 3 role, which I mean, could be good for the NFL. It could be good for the team as a whole. But when it comes to fantasy and stuff, it's a little more tough to get hyped for.
So I think we all agree, Ty. I think you actually said it best. Ladd McConkey is this high floor player that has the ability to actually be a very consistent contributor for an NFL offense with the way he runs routes so seamlessly. It is a work of art to watch him. If you haven't watched Ladd McConkey even at the Senior Bowl, or you watched his go watch a highlight clip of his routes. I know it's like the dumbest way to like experience a player because it's just only the good. But you'll see what we mean when you watch a highlight clip of Ladd McConkey's routes versus Brian Thomas's routes, or shoot, I'll even throw out Malik Nabers' routes. I mean, there's just some beauty that Ladd McConkey has in his routes that's just different from the rest of this class. Let's move it on, though. Ty, we'll talk about another wide receiver favorite of yours. I'm curious to actually get all of our thoughts on him. It is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. He's a fascinating one because now we're getting to this tier where it seems like the top 6 are kind of set in stone. Troy Franklin was flirting with it for a little while. You hope for a little bit more at the combine, but I mean, you look at his last year at Oregon here, 81 receptions for nearly 1,400 yards, over 17 yards of reception, and 14 touchdowns. He was the guy for Bo Nix. Give me the pros of Troy Franklin, Ty.
He is a long, fast, and smooth wide receiver that can get off the line of scrimmage most of the time. He does struggle with a bit of physicality. The guy gets their hands on him, and it does take him it's not like immediately shut down, but it takes him a little bit longer to kind of get off of the DB to get into his route then. So it's not, that's like the one thing that I can say right away. But here's the thing with Troy Franklin. He's got a ton of diversity with his routes. It's not just downfield stuff. It's over the middle. It is underneath too. That's just the way that Oregon utilized him, and he was effective in those ways. He has flashes where his height and length is used to bring in very tough balls thrown his way. It doesn't happen all the time, and I wonder if it's more so just needs some refinement, get him some NFL coaching. I know that you kind of teed it up that I was a big fan of Troy Franklin, and I kind of went back to his film and was kind of like, okay, I can see the flag to the guy. So this sounds a lot. This sounds like I'm kind of
More
like
negative.
pessimistic on the guy. I'm really not. Like, he's still my wide receiver 7 because I think he is enough of a downfield threat. He's kind of a Jalen Hyatt in some ways, but I think Jalen Hyatt's only one thing was just going straight.
Yeah.
At least Troy Franklin.
He was a straight line player. Yes.
Yeah. At least with Troy Franklin, you're getting a little bit more of a receiver in the sense of like he knows the nuances to route running. May not show it all the time, but I also wonder, like, that Oregon offense was so just like, don't try to do too much. Here is the structure of our offense. Play within the structure. So, like, I think there's some intrigue to Troy Franklin, but what I thought was once a like fringe wide receiver 1 type of wide receiver, very high end wide receiver 2, I think he's really just a solid wide receiver 2 for some team. And I'll let Cam go over fits and stuff because I think there are some teams out there that would really, really like his services, but he's not going to be for everybody.
You brought up his comp. Everybody is calling somebody DJ Chark in this draft. I hate it.
But makes sense
it's
here.
Troy Franklin. It is Troy Franklin here. Troy Franklin is the real DJ Chark of this draft. I really want that to become a trend for future drafts. Like, who is the DJ Chark in this year's NFL draft? And this year, I do think it's Troy Franklin. But Cam, let's talk fits. If we want Troy Franklin to be fantasy relevant, where does he need to end up?
Man, I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I hate to keep saying. My problem is I hate to keep saying the Chiefs and Chargers, right? Just be connected to Mahomes and Justin Herbert. But honestly, I think both of them. I think one that could either be really good or absolutely disastrous is Carolina. Of just, either Canales is going to help Bryce Young figure it out, and Troy Franklin's going to play great opposite Deontay Johnson, or it's going to be, that one feels super boom or bust to me. Speaking of DJ Chark, actually, is he, or did he leave Carolina? Or is he still on Carolina?
He's out. He's
no
out.
Longer there. All right. Well, so he'd be the DJ Chark replacement. There you go.
It's the stars are aligning. DJ Chark is Troy Franklin's a Carolina Panther.
And then I think my other one is Indianapolis. I think it'd be fun to be able to really give Anthony Richardson someone that he could really air it out to, right? I mean, they have Alec Pierce, but I think the Alec Pierce experiment is coming to an end, sadly. So I think, getting a guy like Troy Franklin in there could be a lot of fun to watch in that offense.
Yeah, as much as I like Alec Pierce, I think I would rather see what Troy Franklin can bring to that offense instead. We'll keep it moving here. We only got 2 more wide receivers to cover before we get to the tight end, so let's move on to our next wide receiver here. It is Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. 6'1", 221, 4.39 40. You love the 40-inch vertical jump. Final year, 71 receptions. Just over 1,250 yards, 17.7. My gosh, I cannot talk. 17.7 per reception. This is kind of the range where you can throw a dart at any of the guys remaining, and any of them could kind of be next in this tier. Mm-hmm. Can we? What edge does Xavier Legette have over the rest of the class here, Ty, that puts him ahead of the rest of the names that we'll be talking about?
I think it's really the combination of just kind of speed and overall strength of play. He's kind of got this weird kind of production profile because like the first 4 years of his career, there was like nothing. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden his 5th year, boom, there he is. Right. So again, it's really just kind of speed that he has for a guy at his size. He's really like 6'1", 220. Right. And he ran a 4.39, I think it was. Like,
he built like a running back.
He's built like a running back.
Yeah.
He has some really impressive high point catches that I'm just like, that does not show up all the time for wide receivers. Yeah. So you've got some kind of body control, how to win with physicality at the high point. I think a weakness to his game is really just kind of the underneath stuff, because he doesn't really have like the fluidity to like adjust on the go when you're going across the field underneath and stuff. There is some intrigue to Legette that if he finds the right situation, he could be a really productive wide receiver too for a team.
So where are some of those spots that we could dream up? Because I do agree. I think anybody at this point, it has to be the right situation for them. But where are some of those spots where he could end up being a nice little piece if he finds the right home?
Yeah, I like him in Cincinnati as well. I think he's another guy that I really like there. I don't know about this spot. I don't know why I put it, but I kind of do. It's I don't know why I'm going back and forth with. It's New Orleans, just because of the fact I know the quarterback situation is gross. I know the offense isn't exactly pretty, but they have no wide receiver 2, right? I mean, this is a team.
I'll put some respect on Rashid Shaheed. Yeah, put some respect on my man. Right, you better believe I'm taking him at best ball wide receiver. If you're
going to go after Bob Douglas, I can say Rashid Shaheed, not a wide receiver 2. Come on.
Oh, no.
I mean, they're in the same tier. They're fine wide receivers. But I'm not considering. I'm not out here saying Rashid Shaheed's a difference maker, right? I mean, he'll have like 8 plays a year. I mean, look at Rashid Shaheed's stat line last year. The dude probably had 17 catches for 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. I mean, it was just like, 70-yard touchdown every other game. And that's kind of all he is. Whereas I think, Legette could be a proper wide receiver 2.
No way you just said Legette.
No. I knew it was going to pop up. It's because we were joking about it.
Yeah.
It's because we were joking about it. So then I had...
That's true. We were joking about it before.
I like New Orleans. Cincinnati is my favorite one for Legette.
We're going to move on before you say some other heinous crime-worthy takes of Rashid Shaheed and Pop.
I'm gonna look at
Williams.
this stat line so you can try and tell me it's.
We'll revisit this
receiver
later.
too.
Let's move on to the last wide receiver we're going to talk about. Adonai Mitchell teammate Xavier Worthy out of Texas. 4.2140, the new fastest 40 time in NFL Combine history. The people love it. The people eat it up. Production profile isn't too bad. 62 for 981 in 2021, 60 for 760 the next year, 75 for just over 1,000 yards. It's final year, but the touchdowns is decreasing 12 to 9 to 5. He's quick. Xavier Worthy is quick, but what do we think about him as an overall prospect high?
He's not really for everybody. I've seen some people have.
Boy,
him as
well,
high
that sounds
as-
like another Texas wide receiver I know.
Oh, no kidding.
Keep going.
I've seen some people have Xavier Worthy as their wide receiver like 5 and wide receiver 6. I'm like, that's just like blasphemy. Like, that's just not accurate at all. I think you see the highlight reel and you go, wow, that is remarkable. He is super fast and he is you can make something happen with him. He's another lightning in the bottle kind of guy. I'm like, okay, but there's more to a game than just what you do after the catch.
It's more than your sick YouTube highlight reel that
Tavon
Texas
Austin.
Longhorns fan 98 clips up for you.
Yeah, right. I think he is very similar to Marquise Hollywood Brown in the sense that there is a lot that is left to be desired in all other aspects of receiving than just after the catch and being a downfield threat. Like, he can get downfield really, really quick because he is very fast. But he doesn't really separate because he just does not have the size to, I'm not going to say bully DBs off the line, but like,
He's 160 pounds.
he's 165 pounds.
Yep.
And like
5'11", 165.
Yeah.
Yep.
and I think a lot of people too, I have to shout out Trevor Sycamore, who does the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and go listen to them. They do phenomenal draft work over there. But he's like, after Xavier Worthy ran the 40 and he broke the record, it seemed like everyone kind of counted his speed twice. And it was like, if you knew that he was fast, don't give him the extra benefit of being fast again, right? And I feel like that's a trap that a lot of people kind of fell into with him.
That's what the 40 times do, is they double count it. It's like, great, the guy's fast.
Yeah.
We all knew that already. It's fun, but it doesn't make him a better prospect because, great, he proved to us that he's freaking fast.
Yeah. It feels like he had the combine this year that people were hoping Jalen Hyatt would have had last year.
Yes.
That's how I feel about it, is like, if Hyatt had this, we're probably talking about him in the same area we're talking about Worthy right now, right? But he didn't quite have it, so he was end of the third round. So it's just, there's obviously a lot of upside. Anytime you get a guy this speed, there's always upside. But that, guys running this fast hasn't always panned out, especially when you're down at 165. Not everyone's Tank Dell.
Tyquan Thornton is a name that comes to mind. Again, a Jalen Hyatt you can throw in there. Not all these guys pan out in the NFL. Matter of fact, if you pull the list of 40 times and you see the guys who actually panned out and became prevalent players, the list isn't too long of guys who actually check out there. Let's briefly chat about other wide receivers in this class, though, because there are quite a few names that we left off here. I guarantee people are going to be asking about Keon Coleman, Ricky Pearsall, Malachi Corley, even Javon Baker, excuse me. Can we each take 30-second shouts to one of those guys I just mentioned? Ty, I'll start with you. I know who you're going to pick.
Also, my guy, Ricky Pearsall. I see a lot of Adam Thielen in his game, and make whatever comments and assumptions you want with that. But look, we're Vikings fans. I see a lot of Adam Thielen in Ricky Pearsall's game. That's all that I'll say.
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm going to take Slick Rick as well. I see a lot of I'm just kidding. No, I'll go with my guy, Keon Coleman. I think I don't know. I think at this point, right, people have been burnt so many times by the big contested catch, not a lot of separation guys, that, at the beginning of the draft process, we were like, oh, maybe people are going to take a chance first round of Keon Coleman. Now it's kind of like, oh, you probably end a day 2 pick, which, I feel like does make sense. I think he's got a lot of upside, but at the same time, I think it's going to depend on situation. And I think you got to realize, like, if you're going to take use a rookie pick on him, you could have a Quentin Johnston, a Treylon Burks, kind of situation on your hand where you're really disappointed. So I think he's definitely a very boom or bust kind of wide receiver prospect.
Yeah, I'll just briefly touch on Javon Baker quick, mostly because I think you see a little bit of steam getting behind him in the Twitterverse recently. I'm not in love with him. I mean, you look at Zance Learline's goodness, Lance Zierline's comp of Josh Palmer, and that's where I think he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I think Javon Baker's going to end up being. But I mean, you like the size. The 40 isn't great, the 4.54, but I think he looks quicker than that on the field. He rushes through his routes, so that's the other thing I don't really necessarily like. So Javon Baker, I think he could end up being a fine little piece in the NFL, but yeah, Josh Palmer is about what I would expect out of Javon Baker. Let's wrap it up here, fellas. We got one tight end that we're going to talk about because this is not a Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer tight end class full of studs. We got one. But he's worth talking about because he will go very early in this draft. It is Brock Bowers out of the University of Georgia. Smaller than people anticipated. That's the one comment. I mean, 6'3", he's still a big dude, but everyone, is throwing around that Twitter clip, right, of how he looks so small in that interview. But I mean, we're touting him as, a top 15 pick, and I don't know if he falls past the Jets at 10. Is that accurate? Top 12 for sure. It feels people are touting top 12. I'm very safe saying he won't fall out of the top 15. And the Jets are the most commonly mocked team for him right now. That's how I'll kind of summarize my intro here for Brock Bowers. How good is he though? If he's going to be a top 10 pick, 'cause he's got to be better than the Kincaid, went into the first round last year, but where does he maybe like a Kyle Pitts is a good comparison, who Kyle Pitts, is the 4th pick in the draft. How does Bowers kind of fall in that range in terms of the prospect we're looking at?
He is quite literally like somewhere between Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid. I think the thing is, like, when we're talking about these three guys, their calling card and their main intrigue as a prospect was their receiving ability and the receiving threat. They were not like very well-rounded blockers, which is the other kind of big part of the tight end position. And like, my comp for him will sound kind of lofty. It's George Kittle, but that is very much the receiver George Kittle, not the blocking type. So he can be that big slot. He can be he's going to be a weapon for an offense. He's not your traditional hand in the dirt kind of tight end, even though that's how he will be lined up most of the time. He's just not that kind of big and hulking presence on the offensive line like you would see a George Kittle be or something like that. So yes, Brock Bowers, in terms of, the receiver, somewhere between Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid, and I would say closer to Kyle Pitts than he is to Dalton Kincaid. I just think the reason why he's not going to crack top 5 or top 10 is just because he is not to that level that Kyle Pitts was. And then you add in the blocking aspect to the tight end game, and he's not really that dude in the blocking game. So I think really his sweet spot is like 10 to 18.
Yeah, I will say the thing he has going for him is most teams are moving towards the 2 tight end of you have a blocking, you have a receiving tight end. So that is the thing that he really does have going for him, is this is the way that the NFL is moving. And obviously his production profile is amazing at Georgia, but yeah.
Where should he be ending up? If the sweet spot is 10 to 18, somewhere in there, Cameron, where are like the ideal landing spots for him where he could potentially jump? Yeah, I mean, I think he'll go after the 3 wide receivers, and depending on where these quarterbacks fall, I assume there'll be 4 quarterbacks taken ahead of him, but he could be taken as early as pick 7 in your Superflex drafts.
Yeah.
Where would that spot have to be in order for him to go that early?
I don't know. I think the spots I like him at are the Jets. I like him at, the Colts at 15. I think Bengals could get crazy at 18 if the Chargers trade back. Maybe they make that pick. I agree with you. I personally don't think he makes it past Indianapolis at 15. I think if he's sitting there, I think that's a pick they have to
Too
make.
good of a weapon for them to
Yeah.
pass up on.
Yeah. So, I think all those spots could be really good. I think it'll be dependent on where other guys go as well. Obviously, if you have a tight end premium, then that just adds a little bit of extra to it. And maybe a little bit of roster construction comes into it. Because like Brian, depending on like Brian Thomas and him are just gonna be so similar. Like as far as like overall value, depending on where Brian Thomas goes. So maybe then roster construction comes into it. So I think he'll be right on that bubble, especially if he's a Jet or a Colt or, even a Bengal.
I won't add anything more on to that. I think Brock Bowers is clearing away the best tight end in this class, and I don't want to discuss any more tight ends, if I'm being perfectly honest. We'll wrap it up there for the episode, fellas. Anything we want to add before we sign off?
Take the best guy available. That's
Yes.
when you're in your rookie drafts, don't be like, ooh, I'm sitting at the 102 and the first guy took Marvin and Caleb's here. I'm going to pass on Caleb Williams. Take the best guy available and kind of figure it out later.
Yeah, this wide receiver class is one of the best that we've seen in the last couple of years. In the last, I won't go as far to say as ever. But with that comes a lot of wide receivers that are either your flavor or your kind of wide receiver, and some that are not. And that is okay. If the guys that are not your guys work out, it's okay. It's okay. Right. So get as familiar as you can with these wide receivers, because each of them will have a very designed role for them in whatever offense and team they go to.
Yeah, we might have to drop a video of the best way to attack your rookie drafts.
Ooh.
Once the NFL draft. Maybe we'll have to do that. I'll mix that in there. The top 5 tips to attack your rookie drafts. Maybe we'll throw that in as a video. Because I do agree. I mean, we too many times we fall for the Kansas City trick. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You fall for Sky Moore in Kansas City, and you take him too early in your rookie draft, and now he's a nobody. So maybe we should make a video on that for the people. I would enjoy that. Thanks for tuning into this episode, though. We broke down 10 total players in the NFL draft, give you a few bonus ones as well. Make sure you tune in next week. We're going to be predicting the landing spots of a handful of guys in this year's NFL draft. So make sure you subscribe over on the YouTube channel to the audio podcast as well. That way you'll be alerted when all of our newest episodes are out, especially when you hit that notification bell as well. Make sure you have those on. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter. CamLaw, FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Pod for Tyler. The main page, FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook, here on YouTube, TikTok as well. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and deuces.
Deuces.